Hi there, my name is George Karnahan, and I'm a veteran of World War II. I flew 32 missions as a radio operator in a B-24 bomber. I was assigned to the 93rd Bomb Group. I'd like to dedicate this program to the wonderful fellows that I was in the bomber crew with. They were all gone. They're all gone now, but they were really great fellows to fly with, and I sure missed them. Oh, I was working for the federal government as a civilian at the Air Base in Sacramento, and repairing radio equipment. I was 19 years old, and they changed the draft down to 18-year-old people, and I thought, oh, wow, I don't want to get drafted into the infantry, so I signed up for the Air Corps, and they said, that'd be great, you've had experiences in radio repairing and operating, and they said you could get a job doing that and not going in the infantry. So I signed up for that in Sacramento when I was 19. I was September of 1942, and that's where I went into the service, and I went down to Monterey, and that's where they gave me some briefing on what the military is going to be like. Gave me my uniform, and from there I went to Camp Stockton, to the fairgrounds. The Air Corps did not have a lot of training areas, so they took over the fairgrounds at Stockton, and I spent a whole month there. I spent November there, and then they sent me to San Francisco. They had the Air Corps had taken over the racetrack there at San Francisco. So I spent a month there, basic training, and I got my birthday. Then I turned to 20 years old, and they still didn't seem to think we got a good basic training courses, so they sent me to Miami Beach, Florida for another month. That was all January of 1940, so I got 3 months of basic training, which didn't really amount to much of anything. I did finally get to shoot a gun, though, down in Florida. Rifles that were used in World War I. They were that old. So, then from there, they sent me to a radio school at the Stevens Hotel in Chicago, Illinois. The government had taken over this big giant hotel there. I guess it was one of the largest hotels in the world, and overlooking Lake Michigan. So I spent 5 months there, and I did real well because the school they sent me to, I'd already been working on the radio equipment and repairing it in Sacramento when I lived there. But anyway, then I was told that they would use me as a radio operator, probably in the South Pacific, at some airfield or something there. Well, I wore the uniform, and a lot of people saw me, and they said, "Oh, George, you're in the Air Corps. Are you going to fly? You fly in an airplane?" I said, "No." They said, "What? You're in the Air Corps and you're not flying?" So I thought, oh my gosh, I got to change my ways and fly in an airplane. So I found out that, yep, they need radio operators on bombers, so that's what I signed up for. After I left the radio class in Chicago, which was about 5 months, and I really did very well there. In fact, I was one of the highest students to graduate there. They told me that I could go to officer's class and become a second lieutenant, but then I would be grounded and wouldn't get to fly in an airplane. I said, no. Everybody wants me to be in the Air Force and fly in an airplane. So they sent me to an air gunnery school in Harlingen, Texas, and I spent, it was about a 6-week class, and it was, we shot all kinds of guns there, even down to shooting a shotgun like we used to go hunting with. And I did okay in the class. My father passed away, and I had to come home for his funeral. So that was August, and I was home in California for about 3 weeks. And then I went back to the gunnery school. I had 1 more week left, and I finished that, and I did very well in the gunnery school. And they said, okay, now we're going to have to set you up to train you to fly in a bomber. I thought, oh, gee, if anything, I'd like to go to the South Pacific and fly in a B-25 bomber. And so they said, well, we don't know yet. So I was sent to Salt Lake City, and I spent about a month there waiting to see what they were going to do to me. So I got an extra week off, and I got to come home for another week and spend with my mother. Well, I got back to Salt Lake City, and they said, okay, George, you're going to fly in a B-24 bomber. So they sent me to Clovis, New Mexico, and I spent almost a month there, but a couple of weeks there, and I only got to fly, I think, about once there. They were short of bombers for training, and so it seemed like I spent most of my time sitting on the ground in a classroom training and not flying. So then they said, well, we got some planes flying out of Colorado, trying to think of the name of the Pueblo, Colorado. So this was October. Well, they sent me there, and I spent about 3 weeks in Pueblo, Colorado, and it snowed practically every day I was there, and we only got off the ground once in a B-24, and so then they said, we'll send you back to Clovis, New Mexico, where it isn't snowing. And so I went back to Clovis, and it was real cold and rainy, and we got some snow there. And so they formed a crew. They said, okay, we got to hurry up and make a crew up to get you ready to go overseas in combat. And we were supposed to have well, we had a pilot and a co-pilot and a navigator and a bombardier. They were all lieutenants. And then we had an engineer and an assistant engineer who knew all about fixing things in the plane, and then a radio operator and an assistant radio operator. So anyway, after our crew was formed, we got on the train and we went to Langley Field, Virginia. And that was supposed to be our 3rd month of training in a B-24. And we still weren't, well, we knew we were going to go over to Europe. I wasn't going to get to go to the South Pacific in a B-25. So we went to Langley Field, Virginia, and I had a great bunch of guys on our crew, a bunch of great fellows to work with, and they were from all over the United States. What we did at first in Langley Field, we flew up and down the coastline of where the Atlantic Ocean is on what they called submarine patrol. And during World War II, a lot of people didn't realize this, but German submarines popped up along the coastline. And what we were to do, we weren't to shoot them down. We were back into the ocean. We were to call the Coast Guard by radio and notify them where we saw them, and then the Coast Guard was supposed to take over. So then they sent me to Long Island, New York, and said as soon as we get some new B-24s, we'll give you one, and you'll fly over to Europe and go into combat. So we spent another month, all January, in Long Island. We didn't even get off the ground, didn't even fly an airplane there. And finally we got a new B-24, and we flew down to Florida to fly overseas, and we were given an instruction sheet, and it says you must take off from Florida and wait 1 hour, and then open up this sealed sheet, and it'll tell you where you're going to go, either to Italy, fly over Italy, or England. Well, the minute we took off the ground, the pilot opened the sheet right away to find out where we were going. And it was England, of all the places. That was the last place I wanted to go. So we flew down south to Puerto Rico and Trinidad, and we were going to all these places to get gasoline. We didn't fly the north, over the north end of the world, because it was snowing then, and it was pretty cold to go over the north end of England, so that's why they were sending us south. And some funny things, and we landed in Belém, Brazil, which was right on the Amazon River. And when we landed, there was a German military plane parked there. And I said, "What? What are they doing here? Here we're at war with the Germans, and here we're both landing at the same airport getting gasoline." And we talked to somebody in Brazil, and he said, "Well, we're not in the war. We're just selling you guys gasoline to get overseas." So, excuse me. So anyway, so then we took off, and we were going to fly to another port in Brazil to fly over to Africa. Well, we spotted a balloon flying around. It was a Navy balloon, a blimp, and I understand that they were on duty looking for German submarines in that area. And so we thought, oh, just for the fun of it, we'll take our bomber, we'll kind of dive on them kind of close. And so we took 2 dives on them, and we scared the guys to death. There was 2 guys in this balloon. And then all of a sudden on the radio, we got a call from the Navy. And they said, "You guys better quit that or we're going to shoot you down." And they said, "We want you to land right away." So we had to land right away in a Brazilian airfield. It was, can't think of the name of it now. And anyway, so we landed right away, and we got our ass chewed out for diving on that Navy balloon. And trying to think of where we landed in Brazil. So we stayed there, and we got gasoline, and they checked over our bomber and said, "Okay, you're all set. You're going to fly at night to Dakar, Africa." And because they said the Germans are all over, they're all over the Atlantic Ocean. If they see you, they'll shoot you down. So we took off, and we still had a little bit of sunlight, and we took off from Brazil, and it got dark, and we were flying in the dark, and we saw this strange light suddenly appear off the one side of our wing, and right away I got I was on what they call the, like a telegraph line, and I called the base back in Brazil, and I also called Africa, and they said, no, we don't know what that is. I have no idea who those people are. And that bright light followed us for about 45 minutes and then disappeared. And so we never did find out what it was, who it was, or what. So we landed in Dakar, Africa, and when we landed in Dakar, Africa, it was weather was nice there, and I had to go and use the latrine, the toilet, and it was kind of a temporary military latrine was canvas, and so I went in there and sat down on the pot, and I take my military clothes down to sit on the pot, and all of a sudden I heard this screaming, and I looked up, and here was this monkey, and it was up in the top, and it jumped down on top of me and grabbed a hold of my right shoulder, and I couldn't get it off, and it kept screaming and screaming, and I was able to get part of my clothes back on, and I got back to the tent where we were staying all night, and the engineer was in the tent there, and he grabbed the monkey and pulled it off my shoulders, and no, I'm sorry, he didn't pull off my shoulders. It jumped off my shoulder by itself, and it landed in the middle of the engineer's bunk, and it did a big poop in there, and the engineer saw it, and he grabbed it, and he held it like a football and kicked it out of the tent, and that was the end of we saw the monkey. But anyway, so, and then our battery went dead on our plane, and we couldn't find anybody around there that could recharge the battery, so we had this great big crank, and we stuck that in there, and then three of us turned this big crank and got the battery charged again. And then we got to Morocco. We got to it was a strange place because it was owned, that country was owned by France, and at that time in France over in Europe was all taken over by the Germans, but not in Morocco. So there was a lot of German prisoners there. They had, and they really liked to see us and waved at us. They didn't like the French or the English, but they liked us Americans for some reason. And here we were bombing their country out, but so we were there, and we got a little work done on our plane, and then we left Morocco. Okay, we could consider that we were in combat when we left Morocco, and we flew around the Gibraltar, and we were had all our 50 caliber machine guns loaded, and we were all very careful, keeping an eye open for German fighter planes flying along the Atlantic Ocean there. But we got to Wales, England, okay, without any trouble. And then we found out that they asked us a bunch of questions about combat duty. And they said, well, no, we weren't told about any of this. They said, what? You went 3 months to training with their bomber in combat? And we said, no, we didn't get any of the training you're asking us about. He said, well, yeah, you got to know about if you're going to crash in Germany, or bail out there? Or I said, well, they didn't tell us about any of that. So they said, well, we got to send you for some more training and before you put you in combat. So they sent us to Northern Ireland, where we spent a month there on training about what could happen if we became a prisoner of war and things like that, which we got nothing on in the United States. And we got off the ground once, I think, there, and we flew around over Northern Ireland. And okay, when we left Ireland, then we went to Hardwick, England, which wasn't too far off the away from the coast of the English Channel. We were one of the closest air bases to the English Channel, and it was the 93rd Bomb Group in the was the base was made on a farmland. It was all farmland around us, and so it was. They made the runways and everything into where the farmers were, and so that was where we spent our time flying our bombing missions from Hardwick. Okay, our very first mission was on May 6th to Cercourt, France, which was just across the English Channel, very close to get to, and it was only about a 4.5 hour mission, and made a lot of the early missions. We were flying close, so the Germans would think that that's where we were going to invade France from the ground, and so that was one of the locations we went to bomb, because there was no anti-aircraft guns there and no fighter planes. But it was kind of cold, and we did have a little snow, believe it or not. It snowed, all of Europe was white. Our seventh mission was to Brunswick, Germany, and it was on May 19th, and it was about a 6.5 hour mission. Well, what happened was we started out and formed with the group over England, and we started out across the English Channel, and all of a sudden we lost engine number 3, which is just to the right close to the cab part of the bomber. And so we decided to run on 3 engines and stay with the group. And we figured we were almost all the way over to Brunswick, and we come back. Well, what happened was the lead plane screwed up and dropped their bombs through their bomb bay without opening the doors. And they said, oh, we got to go back. They dropped the bomb before we got to the target. So the leader said, oh, we got to go back around and go over Brunswick again. So they called in the second bomber to take over. And I forgot what went wrong, but they screwed up, and they had to make another go around for the 3rd time. Well, here we were running on only 3 engines, trying to keep up with everybody, and we were really using up the gasoline, and we didn't know what to do, so we stayed with them, and we flew over the 3rd time and finally dropped the bombs on the target. But then we started slacking off, and I was in the top turret then, and the engineer was running back and forth trying to make sure we got gasoline to the other 3 engines. Well, after they got done shooting us from the ground, some Messerschmitt German fighter planes dove on us. And there were two of us that dove on us from the front, which was rare. And so I started firing at them, and I thought the second plane was one of our fighter planes following them. And the nose gunner on our plane started hollering, "George, George, why aren't you firing?" I says, "Well, isn't that one of our planes?" No, it's two Messerschmitt German planes, one after another. So then I started firing on the second one. Well, they dove between us and the lead plane, and then they cut in a little bit sharp at the back, and the tail gunner, he started shooting at him. Well, either he hit the tail gunner or I did, but anyway, the tail gunner, the second German fighter plane exploded. So either his shells got him or I did, I don't know. But anyway, we didn't know whether we were going to make it back to England or not, so we got all ready to go down in the English Channel, so we started throwing overboard all the heavy stuff we didn't need. The guns, the shells, anything that was loose and heavy, we were throwing overboard. And we put on our suits for going down in the channel to float, so we could float if we had to. Well, as it was, we were lucky. Our base was not too far from the edge of the English Channel, and we just made it back to our airfield, and at the end of the runway, the only one engine was still running. So we lucked out and made it. Yeah, if I remember right, the D-Day invasion was set up for the 4th of June, but because of bad weather, they canceled it, and they were still worried about holding off, and they wanted to get over there before the Germans knew too much about what we were going to do. So, regardless of how the weather was, they decided to go make the D-Day invasion on June the 6th. And they said if the weather was nice, we'll make a second flight over in the afternoon. So we took off, and it was thick clouds. We couldn't even see anything except clouds. Finally, there was an opening, and I looked down, and I couldn't believe it. There was so many things crossing the channel, it looked like you could almost walk across to get over to France. We had all kinds of Navy ships, the French and the English, the United States, and a boat filled with American soldiers to land, and anyway, and then it got, in fact, we got lost. It was so cloudy we got lost, so we found another group that was flying over, so we asked if we could join them, and they said yeah, but they were lost too. So finally we found a place in France where we dropped the bombs, and we come back, and we got our butt chewed out for doing wrong. And we didn't take off in the afternoon because the weather got real bad and so cloudy that, so we only made the one invasion. And so anyway, I flew a few more missions, and then on July the 6th, or July the 4th, we were told that we were not to celebrate July the 4th in England because it was English people we fought in the 1700s for freedom. But you know, we just couldn't take that. So on the evening of July 3rd, and we'd already been told that we weren't to celebrate the 4th of July. And so another radio operator and myself, we went out in the middle of the night and took a couple of flare guns out of the Palmer, and we went over in the farmer's field next door and shot these flares in the sky. And oh, it was really wild. And there were some other people doing it too beside us. So the next day we were told that because of that, they were going to take our privileges of going to London, England for a weekend for a couple of days, I guess. And they were really mad because we... So on July the 4th, they had a bomber that had an engine replaced, and you had to take them in the sky and fly them around a little bit before you took them on a mission. Well, you couldn't take off in a bomber. Of course, you had to have the pilot, co-pilot, to fly the bomber, but they wouldn't let you take off unless you took a radar operator and an engineer. So our pilot says, "Hey, George, you and the engineer got to go with us. We're just going to fly around over England and Scotland." And so we said, "Okay, so we'll go." So on the 4th of July, we got a nice tour up when we're getting shot at. That was the nice part about it. And we flew all over England and Wales and Scotland, and we were up in the air almost over 5 hours that day, I guess. And so that was a real nice flight. Okay, we had a mission to fly over Hamburg, Germany, and it was on a Sunday, and that scared us. We knew we were going to really get shot at going over, and so we were all kind of scared, and we were all, seemed like we all had to do a urination. And before we got to Hamburg, well, on the plane we had a five-gallon glass container and a little funnel in the top. And this is what we used to do a pee in. Well, what happened was it got frozen up and we couldn't pee in it anymore. So the pilot said, well, he says, open the bomb bay doors a little ways and you can urinate there in the bomb bay and then close up the bomb bay doors. Well, we did that, and then when we started to go across Hamburg, the bomb bay doors were frozen shut. We couldn't get them open. And the pilot says, we can't get the bomb bays open. So you and the engineer got to go down there with a screwdriver and chip the frozen urinals out so we get the bomb bay doors open. So here the engineer and I are down there with screwdrivers breaking the ice, frozen ice, so we got the doors open and we did drop the bombs. But the worst was yet to come. And that's when we landed back at the air base. It started to melt, and all this pee started melting and dripping out and falling on the ground underneath the bomber, and it stunk and oh, what. So that was a sad thing that happened. Then one of our missions, I don't recall just which one it was, as we were starting to fly over the target, we got the bomb bay doors open okay, but I think there were 500-pound bombs, and there were 4 of them. And what happened was, and each bomb had a little propeller on it. And the idea was to, once the bombs fell out and the propeller started turning, as soon as the propeller flew off, then the bomb could become ignited the minute it hit something. Well, what happened was, there were 2 bombs, one bomb over the other bomb. Well, what happened was the bomb on the bottom got stuck for some reason and didn't fall. And the top bomb, the front part came loose and it just hung in there by the back hook. But the wind was blowing on it and the propeller was blowing on it inside the plane. And I was down in the bomb bay as we flew over the mission, so I started screaming. I said, God, get it, we need help, we need help. we got to stop this propeller from coming out. So the engineer came down in there, and I lifted the bomb back up, and then he grabbed a hold of the little propeller and then twisted it back up again. And as I hold the upper bomb, he got the lower bomb loose by hand, and then he helped me with the upper bomb, and we got it loose, and we dropped it by hand. So we lucked out. Of course, originally we were told we were only going to fly 25 missions, and it didn't work that way. We got up to 25 missions, and then they said, "Oh, we're short of bomber crews. We're going to have to at least fly you 30 missions." So wow, I flew 30 missions with my crew, and then I got grounded. I got a cold or something, and my hearing turned bad in both ears. So they grounded me, and they said, "Well, you can't fly. You can't fly now if you can't hear." So I was grounded, and my crew, when they got done with 30 missions, they said, "Oh, we need you to get to fly some more." So they wound up flying 34 missions, and then they finally got grounded and completed. Well, I wasn't flying with them all, so they quit and came back to the States, and they said, "Well, George, we're short of radio operators. We're short of radio operators. We don't know how many more missions you're going to fly." So they put me with another crew, and this was my 31st mission. And what happened when we started flying over the target, we lost an engine. And it was right when we started to drop our bombs. And the plane, we started dropping out of away from the rest of the planes, and when the bombs started to fall, they started hitting the inside of the plane against the side of the bomb, bomb bay, and so I started screaming to the pilot to straighten the plane up, straighten the plane up. The bombs are falling inside, hitting the side of the wall, and so we finally got the plane straightened up, and the bombs dropped, and we got back then okay on 3 engines, and but yeah, we made out okay. That was, so then I got back, and they said, "Oh, you can have a couple of days off." So I got a train ticket, and I went to London and meet a girlfriend I had made there in London, and spent about 3 days in London. Well, when I got back, I figured I was going to have to keep flying because they said they were short of radar operators. So I come into the barracks, and they said, "Oh, George, guess what? You're all done flying. You're done flying." I said, "What?" "Yeah, go look at the bulletin board. They got your name up. It says you're going to be retired from flying now." So I went in, and sure enough, there on the bulletin board, was my name, and said that I was completed, but I only completed 31 missions, and my crew did 34 missions. So we all lucked out, really. So anyway, when I was done with all my mission, they said, "Okay, George, we're going to have to send you over to Wales, and you'll be there until we can get a transportation for you back to the States." Well, I found out that my crew, original crew that I'd been with, they come back on the ship. I don't know whether it was the Queen Mary or not, but they said, "Well, George, we don't know whether you're going to come back on a ship or a flying plane." Well, then I spent a couple of weeks in Wales waiting and waiting, and finally they said, okay, we're going to get you back in an airplane. So they put me on a C-47, I'm not sure now. It was an American military transport plane. And I flew from Wales to Iceland. I spent a couple of days in Iceland, then took off to fly to Presque Isle, Maine. Well, I got halfway to Presque Isle, Maine, and we lost an engine on our transport. Well, we were over halfway to Maine, but instead of continuing on to Maine, we turned around and went back to Iceland again. Well, they fixed up the motor on the plane and they put us back on board, and we flew all the way back to Presque Isle, Maine, and I was told I'd have 30 days off, and they gave me a train ticket from Presque Isle, Maine to Santa Monica, California. And I was able to come back and spend some time with my mother, and then they sent me to Scottsfield, Illinois, and when I got there, they retrained me again to do some flying, and I found out that they could use me on a transport over in China. So I signed up for that right away. I didn't want to go back to combat again. So on the night that I was all packed and ready to go to China, I went to the local theater there, and some reason or other, there was scarlet fever floating around, and I caught that, and instead of going to China, I wound up in a GI hospital for a month, and I never made it back over. So they said, well, with your experience in repairing radio equipment, George, we'd like to keep you here, because they had a school there, a training school for flying and doing radio transmitting work. So I said, I'll take it. So I stayed there until I retired from the military in September of 1945.